Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video we're discussing You Like It Darker, written by Stephen King. It's his latest collection of short stories and novellas. They range in length from about 6 or 7 pages to around 150 pages. And they also range in enjoyment value for me. Unfortunately, many of these stories in this collection I didn't enjoy very much at all. And I found they just felt like, to me, it was almost like Stephen King was dragging different stories, from drawers or off shelves, dusting them off and thinking, okay, that will do. Or maybe changing a couple of things here and there and saying, done, that will do. It felt like that to me. And also in this collection, he raves about this sequel to Cujo. I'll describe more about that in this video. But for me, it didn't feel like much of a sequel at all. In this video, I'll rank each story from my least favorite to my favorite. Before I do, I want to talk about a couple of general themes and thoughts I had about the entire collection. So first off, the title, You Like It Darker. Are the stories in this collection dark enough? Well, I don't think so, but it may depend on your interpretation of what darker is. Do you want dark themes as in dark horror themes, like blood and gore and shock value? Do you want that in these stories? I don't think you'll get that in all these stories. In some stories you may, but not in all stories. Do you think darker refers to what people are capable of? If that's the case, then I think many of these stories may go into that territory. Stephen King, often in his books, likes to explore the extremes of what people will do. And I think in this book, those extremes are explored quite well. In many stories, dark things happen to people, or they do dark things themselves. Or do you think darker means situations people find themselves in? What's the worst situation you can imagine for somebody? If that's the case, then I think sometimes in these stories that happens. So, darker can mean different things for different people. But when I think about the title, You Like It Darker, and Stephen King as an author, I think horror. In this collection, the horror element wasn't really there in most of the stories. I'm thinking about characters in this collection, and there are many characters in this collection that are retired. Retired men contemplating life and death. Maybe Stephen King's thinking about that more. But it seemed like in the past, we had many characters who were writers. And that was like with Dean Koontz as well. Dean Koontz has written many characters that are writers. So they're getting to a certain age, I think, and they're changing. And now Stephen King wants to write about characters that are retired and thinking about life and death. That's what it felt like to me. Now let's go to the rankings of my least favorite to my favorite. Firstly, my least favorite, number 12, Finn. A story that felt written many years ago. A story that I think doesn't need to be told or included in this collection. It's a story about mistaken identity. We have this character Finn. He's walking along a street and he has bad luck, basically. He's a character that's had bad luck since birth. And he's walking along a street and people mistake him for somebody else. They grab him, abduct him, and take him somewhere, and then other things happen from there. It just felt very comical. So when the abduction happened, I thought, well, what's going to happen next? Is it going to be traumatic? And yes, traumatic things do happen. Is it going to be dangerous? Yes, dangerous things do happen. So I think in a way it is linked to that You Like It Darker theme, because dark things are happening in this situation for the main character. But towards the end of this short story, it starts to turn comical, almost cartoonish. It kind of felt like The Simpsons in a way towards the end. And then the very end of this short story is very abrupt. I won't tell you what happens at the end, but it's so abrupt, I don't think it's a great ending. I think it's just too quick. And it just feels like nothing's explained very much with that ending. It feels like I'm going to explain something as a big misunderstanding and then end it there. So dark things happen, yes. Do you feel like it's going to be dangerous for the character? Yes, well I did anyway. Did you think the ending matched the rest of it? No, I didn't. So overall, it just felt like this story was quite jumbled. I mean, you have this big build-up. You explore the character, explain about his bad luck. You have this abduction. You have this dark and dangerous setting. He finds himself in this kind of environment where anything could happen. He's not safe. Then you have a comical ending. It just felt comical and very abrupt. Now, I rate this a 1 out of 5, my least favourite story in this collection. Number 11, The Turbulence Expert. You take a paranormal concept. You inject it into a short story. You don't explain anything about it, about how it works. And you want the reader to believe everything that happens in this story, to just engage with it, to absorb it, and to like it. I didn't like it. I don't like when you have paranormal things happening in stories, you don't explain them. You don't need to explain it in great detail, but you need some reason for it, especially something like this in this story, because what happens is quite odd. You have this guy who's got a strange job. He gets a call and he's told, go on this flight, sit on this seat, and take the whole flight because this flight may be in danger. I won't tell you anything else about the story, but it's quite mysterious in that way. But you don't get anything explained. You don't get explained about his powers. We understand he has certain powers, he has to, because if he's not on this flight, we understand this flight could be in danger. That's the reason he's there. I wonder if this story needed to be longer. Make it longer, explain it better, put better detail in there, put a history, put explanations about the power he has, about what he does. Just give us something. Just don't make it just so short that you give us nothing. I mean, it's like saying, this guy has a power of making paint dry quicker, and we don't get explained how he does it. He walks in a room after somebody's painted all the walls and the ceiling in a room, and suddenly the paint's dry. No one knows how it's done, but it just happens when he's in the room. That's what it felt like in this story. And I don't like when that happens. I don't mind paranormal stories where you get some detail and not huge detail, that sometimes the mystery is part of the story. I don't mind that. But in this story, there's no detail at all. I rate this story 1 out of 5. Number 10, Two Talented Bastards. This is my lowest rank mid-length story in this collection. This felt like a story that begged to be longer. King needed to take the concept. Now, the concept of this story is good. I enjoyed the concept. This felt like it was just too short. Didn't explain it very well. The characters felt like stereotypes. And then it also kind of felt like the 4400, that TV show, in a way. In a very small way, but it felt like that to me. If this was longer, if we explored the history of these characters more, if we explored what happened in their past more, this would be better, I think. Because when we get that description of the past, basically we have this guy whose father's died, and I think the son is about 50 or 60 in this story. His father's just died. His father was a famous author who became an author in his 40s, I think, and his father's best friend was a famous painter who became a painter in his 40s as well. So they became famous. They became well known at around 40, in their 40s. And we get the story about how that happened, because it came out of nowhere, it seems. And this journalist is asking questions about how it happened. How these two people who are friends, living in the same area, suddenly became famous in different creative fields at the same time. And the son thinks, well, there's nothing about it, there's no mystery about it. But he starts to learn something else. He starts to learn there is a mystery. There is a reason behind why his father and his father's best friend suddenly had this great talent and became world famous. But the story behind it just feels like campy sci-fi comedy. There's no horror in it. Nothing feels dark. Nothing feels dangerous. If this was a movie, a sci-fi movie, it'd be a C-grade movie in my view, because the story we're given is just pretty poor in my view. There's nothing in there that really makes me think sinister. It makes me think danger. It makes me think these people are going to have something horrible happening to them. And I expected that from that title of this collection called You Like It Darker. So again, other stories in this collection linking to that title. This story, I don't think so. There's nothing in here that's dark and dangerous. There's no situation. There's no character choice. No action that's dark and dangerous. It's campy sci-fi comedy. I didn't really enjoy it. If it was fleshed out more, maybe Stephen King could add more in there, put danger, put something dark in there, make some characters act in certain ways or do certain things. I don't know. But for me, it's too short, maybe for what the story needs to be, and it's just campy sci-fi comedy. Number 9 is The Answer Man, another mid-length story in this collection. And I rate this slightly higher than Two Talented Bastards because in this story, the characters feel more human, they feel more fleshed out. That's the only reason this is higher on the list. So basically, this story. It's about this guy, and he's driving along one day, wondering about his future, and he sees this person sitting on the side of the road at a desk with this sign saying, "The Answer Man. Answers for like $5.25 or something." There's some price to a dollar value in this story. And this story is historic, so you've got to think about cash conversion rate to present day. But anyway, this guy pulls off on the side of the road and he wonders, why not? I'll give this guy some money and I'll ask my questions and see what he comes up with. And we're told there's rules. And I won't go into the rules all about that. We're told there's rules to what questions you can ask. This guy asks some questions and he finds out that his plans for the future are worthwhile. He's going to succeed. So he goes ahead with those plans. And his life is pleasant. And this is where this story starts to feel like a cross between Leave It to Beaver and The Twilight Zone. That's how I think about this story. Anyway, a few years later in his life, he's living the dream, he's got his own business, he's got a family, he loves life. And then, out of the blue, the Answer Man turns up again. So he goes, I'm going to ask more questions and find out more answers about my life. And he does. And we straight away get the impression those answers aren't that good. And this is where it's a bit obvious in this story as well. There's no mystery about the answers the Answer Man gives our main character. You can tell straight away what's going to happen in the story. And the things I thought were going to happen did happen. So terrible things start to happen in the book. Life starts to be turned upside down for our main character. It's not Leave It to Beaver anymore. It's a bit more like, I don't know, it's a bit darker. It's a bit more grim. And then the Answer Man turns up again. So more questions are asked, more answers are given, and you know what's going to happen next. So it's a bit obvious. So for me, even though in this story the characters are written well, the human side is good. The setting in this story, the historic setting, I think is done very well. Just that obvious nature of those questions and answers that we already know what's going to happen next, that was poorly done in my view. I think in the back of this book, King mentions that this story was hidden away somewhere and not completed. And was it his nephew or something said, hey, you should complete this book. And so that's the reason he completed it. So I don't know if this story needs to be in the collection. Yes, dark things happen in this story. There are dark twists and turns. So it links with that You Like a Darker theme. But are they dark enough? I'm not sure. And having this obvious nature what happens in the story, that was poorly done in my view. I rated this 1.5 out of 5. Number 8 on my list is The Fifth Step. The shortest story in this collection, I think maybe 5 or 6 pages in the version I read anyway. It's okay as a story, but it feels a bit incomplete, like it's missing some sort of spark. Even though that twist at the end I enjoyed a lot. I found that twist quite disturbing, quite dark, so it links well with You Like It Darker, the title of this book. But I just felt like it needed something else. The whole build-up was okay, I think. We have these two guys sitting on a park bench, a younger guy and an older guy. I think the older guy is retired, so there you go, a retired person in a story. And they're talking, well, the younger guy is talking anyway. He starts telling the older guy about his AA, about his time in AA, and his history, what he went through, and what caused him to be in AA in the first place. And the older guy was unsure at first if he wanted to hear this story, but he starts to hear it and becomes interested. There's a twist at the end. I won't tell you what it is. It's very sudden. It is quite shocking. So I like that twist a lot. But I just think that somewhere in the characters, there's a spark missing. Somewhere in that whole dialogue, the whole interaction, there's a spark missing. I don't know if this story needs to be longer. I'm not sure. But there's just some sort of spark missing in that story. And I rate this a 1.5 out of 5. Number 7 on my list is Willie the Weirdo. This is a short story on the short side of the collection. And I enjoyed certain things about this. It's basically about this kid called Willie, and his whole family thinks he's weird. But I don't think his grandfather does. So in this story, we have a grandfather who's living with the family. And Willie and Willie's grandfather seem like they're kindred spirits of a sort. They get along quite well. And his grandfather seems to be the only person in the family who gives Willie, some decent attention, who seems to understand Willie. Because nobody else in the family seems to. And it almost feels like the other members of his family think Willie will be a serial killer or something in his future. You get that impression. And I won't go into everything in this story because I don't want to give it away. There is an interesting ending to this story, quite mysterious. It is open-ended, and it makes you wonder. It's one of those endings where you wonder what actually happened. So the ending to that was okay. That's where the dark and twisted element comes in, I think. And also just in Willie. Willie seems preoccupied with death. He seems to enjoy it. And get that impression for certain things that happen, certain things he says in this short story. So those things do tie in well to the title, You Like It Darker. But for me, I don't know, this just felt like another time where the story is too short. I wanted more in this story. I think with more, it would build up Willie more. Willie just seems like he needs is a character that needs more build up. He needs more description. I want to understand him more. I want to find out what makes him tick. We get very surface details with what makes him tick with his behavior, but nothing really core to who he is as a personality. So for me, that's missing in this short story. And understanding short stories, you can't delve too deeply into things all the time. That's one of the reasons why I think short stories aren't always for me. But for me, even though there are good things in this short story, there are some things that are just missing. It felt a bit cliche. It felt just a bit too neat, I think, sometimes in what happened in the family interactions. But I do like Willie as a character. I like the grandfather as a character. I like their interactions. I like the ending, that open ending. But for me, there's something missing. Not the worst in the collection, of course, and I rate this a 2 out of 5. Number 6 is Laurie. Now, what can I say about this short story? It is a longish short story, so that's why I think I liked it more than some of the other short stories in the collection. There is a dark, sudden happening, a dangerous happening, so there is a link to You Like It Darker, the title. I did like the dog in the story a lot. The main character, he gets a dog. So the main character is retired. His wife has died, I think maybe 6 or 12 months ago in the history of this story. And his sister arrives on his doorstep suddenly with a dog and says, here you go, here's a gift, it's a puppy. Now we all know you don't gift people puppies or any pet out of the blue. You just don't do that. It happens in this book, I don't know why. And this guy is thinking, well, I don't want a dog at all. But we all know what happens. The dog and this guy bond, they become friends, and he loves the dog eventually. So it's obvious what's going to happen. But what's not obvious is an event that happens later on in the story towards the end. Now, I won't tell you what that is. I won't give that away. But it's big, it's sudden, it's off the rails, it's out of this world. It kind of doesn't make sense to the rest of the story. But it kind of does in some way because, we want something dark and dangerous to happen in this story. And it does. So read this story, look out for the ending. I think you'll like the dog a lot. You'll like the protagonist a lot as well. You may even like the annoying sister a lot. I mean, this guy's sister is quite annoying. I mean, who turns up and says to somebody, here's a puppy, surprise, I'm going to give you a puppy. You're going to have to pay and look after, all that sort of thing, when you may not want a puppy in the first place. Who does that? But it all works out in the end, I think, for this guy and this puppy. So for me, I like this story not so much because of that sudden event towards the end. I like this because we're on the human side. We get great characters in this story. It's a bit longer and allows space to explore this old guy and his sister a lot, and the puppy as well. And I like stories with puppies and cats and whatever animal. We have that bond between animals and people. I like that in stories. I rate this a 3 out of 5. Number 5 on my list is Red Screen. This is a very short story, but I like it. I like this a lot. I love the concept. The idea behind it is so good. And I wish that Stephen King would have taken this idea and make it into a novella or a full-length novel. I think the idea is wonderful. I won't go too much into what happens in this short story, but basically we have this guy who's been arrested for the murder of his wife. He tells the police, it wasn't my wife at all. You can't arrest me for her murder. It wasn't my wife. It was an imposter. And he says it was an alien or something. And he says he knew it was an alien because this creature, he says, who was pretending to be his wife, kept nagging him all the time. That's how you can tell if your wife or partner is an alien. They'll nag you all the time, constantly. And the detective in charge of this story, he gets home and his wife starts nagging him straight away. And he starts thinking, well, the guy we arrested, maybe he wasn't crazy after all. Maybe there are aliens out there taking over people or impersonating people. And the story leads on from there. But like I said, it's a short story on the shorter side of the short stories in this collection. But I like the ending a lot in this story. It's open-ended and makes you wonder what next. It's quite chilling and sinister, so it's quite dark, linking to that title, You Like It Darker, quite well. But this story, I just wish Stephen King would take this and extend it. Novella, novel length, I don't care. Just carry it forward and make it something bigger. I think it needs to be, because the concept of this story was just wonderful, and I rate this a 3 out of 5. Number 4 is Rattlesnakes. This was meant to be a sequel to Cujo, so a warning. If you've not read Cujo before, then maybe you want to skip to the next story in this collection, because I'm going to mention a couple of things that happened in Cujo. So this wasn't really a sequel for me. I mean, if you take one character, so basically what Stephen King's done is taking one character from Cujo, aging this character 40 years or so, and just plopping this character into another story that's not related at all to Cujo. Is that a sequel? Well, I don't know. Maybe very loosely, but I was expecting something different. I was disappointed in this story actually because of that. But in Cujo, something happened. So in Cujo, this guy's son dies. And we find out he's retired now, and he's staying at a friend's house in Florida. His wife's now dead as well. And while he's there in his house in Florida, he comes across this other lady who's living there in a house. And this other lady had a tragedy in her own life as well. So 40 or so years ago, her twins died. They were bitten by rattlesnakes and they died. These two characters have a connection because of that. They both had something horrible happen to their children about 40 or so years ago, and they carry that grief around in different ways. So I guess that's a dark component of this story, one of the dark components in this story, because something else happened as well that's quite dark. So this story is closely linked to You Like It Darker, the title. So I like that link. And that shared grief is explored quite well. But something happens in this story. And what happens is, this character, our main character, comes across this lady at a certain point in the story and she's dead. We assume a heart attack or something. He calls the authorities and the authorities think he's responsible. Why? Because suddenly this lady changed her will and bequeathed everything to him. He doesn't know why, but the authorities think that maybe he forced her to and then killed her off. That's where it gets a bit darker as well in the story. So we have darker kind of elements of grief, then we have darker elements of this circumstance, this sudden change in this guy's life that could be quite dangerous for him as well. He's being investigated for possible murder. Other things happen in this story I won't go into that are more paranormal in nature. So the story changes from being like a murder mystery maybe to paranormal as well. And is it really paranormal, or is this guy imagining things? We don't know. There's kind of a question in this story as well, because is it his grief manifesting in these thoughts he's having, or is it really like a ghost or a spirit or some other paranormal aspect that's happening in this story? So I like those questions in this story a lot. I like the way these characters are developed. I like the people side in this story a lot. But what I don't like is being told it's a sequel to Cujo when it's really not. Well, not in my view anyway. I wanted something more related to Cujo. I wanted something almost directly after Cujo, maybe 1 or 2 years after, not 40 years after, and just taking one character and plopping him somewhere else in the United States and saying, here you go, here's a sequel. But anyway, I enjoyed it still, and I rate this a 3.5 out of 5. Number 3 bronze for me is The Dreamers. A longish short story. I enjoyed this. It reminded me of King of old. It just had that feel to it, and I found it fascinating actually. I found the characters well done. I found the concept so well done. I was hooked by this a lot, and I wish this could have been longer. I wish King could have taken this and made it a novella or a novel length. There's something more in this story. I wanted more. So this story is set during the tail end of the Vietnam War, and it follows this guy who was in the war and he got injured, and now he's back home and he's working for a temp agency. He's getting temp assignment jobs in offices. And he's quite clever as well. He's got like a photographic memory or something. And he's getting a bit tired of that. I mean, he wants more money. And he finds out this job going nearby that's offering more money. And it's working for this scientist. And it turns out a very mysterious scientist who doesn't want to record anything like photographs or video recordings or audio. Everything will be written down. And that's all it's going to be. written evidence of what happens. We find out more about what's going on in this lab, and it's quite mysterious. It reminded me a bit of Stranger Things, that TV show. Reminds me of that. I don't know if King wrote this story after Stranger Things became a TV show, I'm not sure. But it has elements in the story that kind of match up with that TV show anyway. But I found this story very fascinating. It's all about trying to open up another realm, another dimension, and trying to coerce people's minds to do that. And that's where I get that link with Stranger Things. But anyway, very engaging, very dark, kind of gripping, chilling as well. The ending of this is quite good. A short story that has a great ending, I think, in this collection. I enjoyed this a lot. Second place, or silver, in this collection for me is On Slide Road Inn. A shortish short story in this collection. I enjoyed it. So basically, we have a family traveling in a car to go and visit a sick relative. In this car, we have a mother and father, we have 2 kids, a son and a daughter, we have the grandfather as well in the car. And the scenes with the family in the car remind me of the Griswolds in those National Lampoon Vacation movies. I had that feel to it in that car. The way the kids are in the story, the way the parents are as well, and the grandfather just feels this comical grandfather in a way as well. But they all feel so real. Every interaction, every piece of dialogue, everything that happens in this car feels so real. It's like King watched a family in a car and said, I'm going to write everything you do. Act natural, just go for it, and it's going to be in a story. That's what it felt like to me. But anyway, they're driving along this road, the shortcut the grandfather said, and they get to a part of the road that's being washed away by floodwater, and they can't go any further. And the father tries to turn around and he drives off the side of the road. Just back on the road a bit, there was this old inn, and the grandfather said he stayed there at some stage. And the kids say, well, I'm going to go back there and explore. So the kids do. They come across something quite shocking and dark and dangerous. And this is where the story changes. It changes from this kind of family type story into this dark and dangerous story. And it's quite a short story, and there's so much packed into this story, but it's all done so well. Every character in this story feels real. That includes characters that pop up later on in this short story. They all feel real. Everything's well done in this story, it all makes sense. There is a surprise twist, a bit of a shock towards the end, but it feels a bit over the top, but also feels real because it matches who the characters are for the rest of the story. Very well done. I love this a lot. I rate this a 4 out of 5 in this collection. The number 1 story, or the gold medal winner for me in this collection, is Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I enjoyed this a lot. It's the longest story in the collection, novella length, and I think it gives King room to develop characters, to make them grow, to give history to characters, just to give space to the whole story, to make everything feel real, enough detail to feel real. And I think King needs that sometimes in stories. King as a writer, I think, is a bit rambly sometimes. He needs that room, that space in a book to make characters and settings, situations, whatever, feel real. So just like Rattlesnakes, the main character in this story is accused of a crime he didn't commit, and accused because he reports a crime. So it just feels like a bit repetitive in this collection, but in this story it makes perfect sense and it felt so real. I mean, this guy has a dream, and he dreams about this isolated kind of service station or roadhouse or something. Nobody goes there, it's been run down and closed for ages. And he dreams there's a body buried there in a shallow grave. What does he do? He travels there and he digs up to find out if it's true, finds out it's true, and reports the crime. And he thinks that if he buys a burner phone and reports it on a burner phone, that he won't be tracked down by the police. Nobody will know he reported the crime or that body. They track him down, of course, and they think, well, you're the only person who's been there for so long. Nobody goes there. You're our main suspect. Of course he is. So the story is about kind of him being wrongly accused of this. He knows he didn't do it, but the police are sure he did. So the whole story becomes about him trying to prove himself innocent. And King in this story takes certain risks with characters. And I like he did that because it just gave this story, I guess, more substance. Because not every character felt same-ish to other stories out there. Biggest example of that in this story is one of the detectives has arithmomania. So basically, he can't stop counting all the time. He sees things and he counts or he multiplies. It's all about numbers. Numbers just swirl around in his mind. So that happens to this character all through the story. It gets worse and worse progressively, and taking over his life. So much so, he's becoming unstable and irrational. It controls him in a way. And he so much wants this guy to be guilty. He's doing things to try to bring that about. And he feels pressures when things don't go right for him. So he has to count to calm himself down. And I like the way that's written in this story. I think in a longer story even, like if this was a novel, it would have been better written, I think, because they're compressing in a novella length things that are happening with this character. You know, that progression to almost insanity in a way, that compulsion to solve this case and prove himself right. That would have been better in a longer version, I think, because it would have been more gradual. The build-up of that in this story is quite sudden, I think. It's a very short time to have this kind of massive ramp up with that behavior. And towards the end, what happens with that character is quite sudden as well. And other characters in this story as well are so well done. I like them all. I like the main character especially, and his relationship with his brother. I think that's so well done in this story. It feels real. His brother's character feels so real as well. For me, this story is the story in the whole collection that best exemplifies the title, You Like It Darker. Because what's more dangerous, what's more threatening than being accused of murder when you're innocent? And just having these people, these police, so insistent that you're guilty, they'll do anything to prove they're right. It's so dangerous. I mean, the stakes are so high for this character in this story. It's a dark moment in his life, a dark sudden twist because of an innocent thing he does. And that's where this dark feeling comes in this story. So I like that in this story a lot. I think it's a great story. Number one for me in this collection. I rate this a 4 out of 5 in the collection. No story in this collection is a 5 out of 5 for me, but this story by far is the best. Taking all 12 stories in this collection, overall I was disappointed with most of them. I rate this overall a 2.5 out of 5. A few good stories in this collection carried the rest forward, but overall I just wasn't impressed, and I just felt like King was taking old things he had tucked away somewhere, brushing them off, maybe changing a thing here or there, and just saying, okay, I'm done. That's what it felt like to me. And saying this rattlesnake story is a sequel to Cujo, it's a cop-out to me because it didn't feel like a sequel at all. On my channel, I review other horror books. If you enjoy horror, check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link to another video for a book I'm sure you'll enjoy.